Hello everybody and welcome back to my life in Taiwan. Something a little bit different this week, and as you can see, we are in a very special location situated right in front of this historic Taiwanese fighter jet, and that's because this video has an aeronautical theme and I was too lazy to drive all the way out to the airport. But yes, in the news this week we have a big story about 600 pilots working for China Airlines. 600 of them are taking a strike, and that has thrown Taiwan's airline industry into absolute disarray.
机师工会与华航持续协商，旅客从瑞士苏黎世回台，在华航柜台前想起滞留海外惨痛经验，忍不住哭了。
以前呢，一般月航都在8000多块。
Now, first of all, one thing I need to point out is that China Airlines is not Air China. Air China was founded some 30 years after China Airlines and operates out of Beijing, whereas China Airlines, the subject of today's video, was founded in 1959 and primarily operates out of Taiwan. But let's get into the main topic of the video, this strike. As this video deals with a slightly more serious topic, there'll be no magic desk scenery changes, just pure, unadulterated facts, and of course, my subjective opinion on this strike, which has actually thrown Taiwan's airline industry into chaos over one of the busiest times of the year, as hundreds of thousands of people are traveling from, to and through Taiwan over the Lunar New Year period. One more thing I want to say before we dive into the meat of today's video is how amazing is it that we live in a country with workers' unions and rights where people feel free to be able to stand up and speak for themselves when they feel hard done by. Good job, Taiwan. Anyway, now, as a British guy that grew up in England during the 1980s and 90s, I am fully aware of the effects that industrial action such as striking can have on a population and how it can politically divide people on either side of the argument.
They don't segregate them from this afterwards, do they?
But also as a resident of Taiwan for the past 11 years that has also used this airline on multiple occasions to fly around Asia, also back to England a couple of times, I also feel that when I read about this story that I wanted to have my say and inform people outside of Taiwan that maybe don't know about what's exactly going on, give them the information and allow them to make their own decisions about whether it's right or wrong. First of all, let's take a look at what the striking pilots are actually asking for. Number one, more pay. And specifically what they're asking for is that their 13th paycheck or their annual bonus is actually more reflective of the pay they receive throughout the year. Basically, at the moment, their 13th paycheck is paid at their basic rate, which doesn't take into account any overtime or additional work or things they earned throughout the year. Therefore, what they're asking for is that their 13th paycheck be more representative of what they've earned throughout the year. At the moment, it's a little bit unfair, and it seems like the managers of China Airlines are basically just trying to cut costs and avoid having to pay their pilots what they deserve. Now, it might be easy for people in lesser paid positions, in lesser paid jobs, such as myself as a teacher, to look at these highly paid pilots and come to the conclusion they're being greedy. How dare they ask for more money? They're already well paid. But when we consider the amount of time and dedication that these men and women have put into qualifying as pilots, not to mention the responsibility they have, the number of lives that are literally in their hands, would you really want a pilot flying you and your family in a metal tube 12 kilometers up in the sky at 500 miles an hour across the ocean? Would you really want him or her to be thinking about how their friend at another airline is getting paid more than them or just more fairly than them? Or would you want them content with their pay, happy and focused on the job at hand and keeping you and your family safe? Whether or not the pay alone is worth striking for, well, that's another matter that may be up for debate. But to come to the second thing that the pilots are striking about, this is where it gets a little more serious, and that's safety. Specifically, the amount of pilots that's required when flying a long-haul flight, and the amount of pilots that China Airlines currently rotas or schedules for those longer flights. Now, before we get into the details of this and discuss China Airlines' logistical practices, and before we get my subjective opinion on what I feel is right or wrong, it should be noted, and this is pretty important, that when doing some research for this video, I discovered that China Airlines is ranked as #1 as the deadliest airline of our generation. In the past 30 years, China Airlines, mile for mile and hour for hour, has become rated as the worst airline in terms of safety. They've had 8 hull losses, which is basically the term used for when an airplane is written off, cannot be used again, and 755 fatalities during their flight times in the past 30 years. Double the amount of second place. Absolutely unacceptable for a first world national airline, and something that definitely has to change. Okay, now we know that pretty disturbing fact, we can take a look at what the pilots are asking for and how they are trying to improve safety at China Airlines. They are asking for 3 pilots to be rotated for a flight of 8 hours or more, and 4 pilots when the flight is 12 hours or more, in order to reduce stress and fatigue and pilot tiredness during flying. Now, when you consider that 80% of all airline accidents are a direct result of human error, and 15 to 20% that error directly comes from the pilot, it also starts to make a lot of sense that these pilots that are responsible for flying us and our loved ones around the world are well rested, focused, and not thinking about how tired they are, right? So that's the basics and the facts about the case and what's happening at the moment, but what do I subjectively think about it? Well, I can see both sides of the argument. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a country where striking industrial action was used by workers as a way of ensuring that the rich and the powerful wouldn't take advantage of the working classes. The power of many with a strong ideology and a belief in what's right and exactly what these pilots are doing can actually make things happen. And you have to admire the pilots for standing up for what they believe is right. Whether they are right or wrong, they genuinely believe that safety is paramount and they are doing the right thing to protect themselves, their families, and of course, us as passengers every time we fly with them. But on the other side of the argument, you have those passengers, of course, that are stranded, families trying to get back together, and some people, maybe not me, some people will argue that China Airlines is a business trying to make a profit, trying to balance as many things as possible, and of course, if they don't make money, they'll go out of business, the pilots will lose jobs. I'm not too sure what side you stand on. Maybe you can put a comment down below and let me know. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate and see the argument from both sides. But personally, I think the best way to solve this problem, and indeed most problems in life, is just to talk about it, discuss the different options, and come to some kind of agreement, which is exactly what is happening now. And in fact, one thing I really like about the pilots and their union is that they've insisted that the talks with their managers from China Airlines take place overnight in these long 10-hour discussion sessions, trying their best to show the managers how it feels to work under stress late at night, just as they do when they're flying these long-haul routes. And this tactic, quite spectacularly yesterday, I think, ended up with the manager of China Airlines having to leave the meeting with a nosebleed. The pressure just got too much for her. But also within these long 10-hour negotiation sessions, progress is being made, and the pilots have actually already been offered more pilots on certain long-haul routes in order to combat this problem of tiredness and fatigue and keeping everybody safe. The money problem, the money issue that they want to solve is still in jeopardy, so maybe we'll come back and talk about that in future. But anyway, yes, I'm gonna wrap this little video up before I give myself too many subtitles to write. If you have any more information on the subject, or you know more than me, which is probably very likely, then feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below and join the discussion. As I said at the start of the video, I feel so happy to be in a country where people can stand up for themselves and do what they feel is right without the fear of repercussions coming from above. Also, let me know if you have enjoyed this slightly more different topical video on the news. If you've liked it, then maybe I'll do more of this in future and raise some more topics that pop up in Taiwanese news. If you didn't like it, also let me know and I won't bother doing it again. As for now, I've got to go. I've been offered a job flying a plane across the Pacific and I'm running late. See you next time in My Life in Taiwan. Peace.